Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we turn today's current affairs into clear, exam-ready insights for UPSC examination. It's May 19th, 2026, and today's edition brings two important analysis topics for your mains preparation. First, the claim that India is now free from Naxalism, examining the security situation, developmental approach, and the larger debate around left-wing extremism in India. Second, decentralized bioenergy systems. We will understand how waste-to-energy systems and solutions can support sustainability, rural development, and energy security in our country. We will wrap up with the focused prelims pointers finally, which will be highly crucial for your upcoming prelims examination. So let's begin. March 31st was the date when our Home Minister promised that Naxalism will be wiped out from India. And after that, he visited the state of Chhattisgarh for the first time. And this is when he has announced formally that India is right now free from Naxalism and that Indian security forces have wiped out them from Bastar and the various surrounding regions which were affected by Naxal forces. So this is exactly what we will discuss in this article today, starting from the absolute basic background of Naxalism to what are the various security measures that we have taken over the past several decades to wipe out Naxalism. And this is where we will start with the very basic understanding of Naxalism. Now guys, understand one particular important fact, that Naxalism in actuality does not have any meaning because it is actually coming from the Naxal Bari. Naxal Bari is a village, is a tiny area which is situated surrounding the region of Shiliguri, which is in the subdivision of Darjeeling district. And this is where this district came to prominence during the 1960s and the 70s decades due to one particular individual who is known as Charu Majumdar. He also had one more accomplice known as Kanu Sannal. Both of them founded the extreme ideology of left-wing extremism, which we also associate with Naxalism. Now this left-wing extremism, that is Naxalism in this case, actually derived from this village, and Charu Majumdar, he was inspired from the Mao Zedong's New Democratic Revolution. Now it is only a joke that there is nothing democratic with this revolution because according to Mao Zedong and according to the tactics that he played in China, the entire revolution was based on violence and arms against the state. So in essence, you can understand that this is an insurgency movement where within the country there can be some people who can come with guns and violence against their state government and against their central forces. So this is exactly one of the many insurgency movements which happened in India across the past few decades. We have heard about various insurgency movements in the northeast parts of our country, right? We also see some of them are still going on, and exactly this is what we see in parts of our central and east India. So in this particular Maoist ideology, they take up violence, they take up arms, they totally disregard democratic politics. They have no regard for elections, they have no regard for representatives like the MLAs and the MPs, and even at the local level, at the panchayat level and the municipal level, they have no regard for that. They only have one particular mission, that is outthrow the state government and establish their own government and also do the same at the central level. And this is exactly what gradually I will also tell you, that how they have also set up an entire political architecture with reference to division of their power. But firstly, understand that this was actually a very massive movement going forward, because when we start to trace the historical timeline of Naxalism in the country, we can trace it back to 1967 when Charu Majumdar started this uprising by collecting some local peasants and some of the marginalized communities. Now this is very important. In various parts of our country, if you see some aspects of violence where the people are very, very vocal against the government, one of the major factors has to do with the local development. Now, since independence, now let us go even back. Since the British times, we have had various tribal communities living in these areas of West Bengal, Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, right now Telangana. We also have some various affected regions which were suffering from lack of development over a period of time. And this lack of development actually gave rise to various dissent, anger, frustration, and upset against the established government. So the local tribals, firstly, they suffered various atrocities under the British government. After independence, the various local leaders, they tried to give a pitch that the government is the same as the British government, that the present government, that is in the post-Indian independence governments, they are also kind of apathetic to your needs and to your demands. And that is exactly what made this Naxalbari uprising. And this is exactly where we have seen that during that time, particularly in West Bengal, this uprising spread like wildfire. And back then, Jyoti Basu, who actually became the chief minister later on, he actually termed that these Nakshals were the enemies of the state. And in 1969, Charu Majumdar, continued this kind of struggle, so-called struggle that he thought of, and founded the CPI-ML, Marxist-Leninist. And this was actually founded on April 22nd, which was Lenin's birthday also. And here, armed struggle was announced as the only path for the emancipation of the marginalized sections in these areas. So, if it started in this particular area, gradually it actually spread to the rest of the areas and gradually to other states. Now, in 1972, Charu Majumdar was actually arrested and he died in police custody. And after that, we saw that the movement was declining for the first time. But more atrocities would actually come on. After that, after Charu Majumdar's death, the government of West Bengal actually cracked heavily on the various local Naxalites. And eventually they spread to the other states such as the state of Bihar. Bihar also took various actions. In 80s and 90s, the biggest spread of Naxalism happened. That is in the surrounding states, mainly in the forested areas. And this movement actually caught the pulse of the local people. The local people thought that there are so many big projects in their own districts, in their own villages, but at the end of the day, these capitalists are coming in their villages, taking away their land, displacing them, giving them no compensation. And this was actually going on over the past few decades. Now, this movement, if it became so successful, the main reason was actually the local people's marginalized status. And gradually, it spread to the forests, and two major groups emerged in this movement. One is the People's War Group in Andhra Pradesh and the Maoist Communist Center in Bihar. So, for the first time, we see that two different factions in different states are operating with clear motive to overthrow the government. Also, the forest cover plus the tribal alienation, the marginalized sections of the tribal population, gave the local Naxal leaders natural sanctity. And this is where they try to brainwash the local people. They try to recruit them in their cadre. They try to pull the youth of the tribal population in their own guerrilla army. Now, the guerrilla operation is kind of a sudden operation. It's kind of a sudden attack that these Naxals did on the various security forces of our country. For example, if one group of the Naxal rebels, they would hear that a police vehicle would be passing through this forest, what they would do? They would hide behind the trees. They would pick various weapons, hide behind the trees and attack suddenly as soon as the vehicle would pass by that forest. This is guerrilla warfare, and this is where we have also seen this particular thing in China under Mao Zedong. So we have to understand that the entire movement, firstly it was founded by Charu Majumdar, then it was carried actually ahead by his disciples, and this is what they followed that particular guerrilla optics very, very strictly. Now, in 2004, a very significant thing happened. CPI Maoist was formed, and here it was seen to be as a peak of the power of these Maoist forces, I mean the Nakshal forces, because here the merger of these two major groups happened, and here they had this elaborate hierarchical structure. Just imagine in the forests of West Bengal, of Chhattisgarh, of the various other affected states, they were having a particular national level organization, wherein firstly if you see at the center of the same we have the Politburo. The Politburo had direct command of various special forces also, or special aspects too, such as military intelligence, communications, publications, even special action teams which were known as assassination squads. So you can understand the picture here, right? Gradually, as soon as Naxalism spread across the various parts of the country, right, wherein we had also seen the emergence of Red Corridor. Do not mind the dates here, these are actually outdated. But as and when this Naxal movement spread through the 80s to the 2000s, we have seen how more and more areas were coming under the influence of these forces. And that is where the state governments started to take strict actions, even much more stricter actions than before, simply because the violence incidents have increased by anything. The deaths actually risen to more than 1000 in 2010, and that is when, you know, the governments of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Orissa, they become very alert, and that is where we see the controversy of Salvadujum. So this is where in Salvadujum, the government of Chhattisgarh and various other parts of the various other states also, they took heavy action against the Maoists, against the Naxalists. And that is where the police heavily cracked down on them, did many kinds of encounters of the major leaders, and also many people died in this crossfire. Many local people also died. That is when various human right violation was starting to be flagged. And that is where the state governments were also under the fire. Why? Because they were having this extreme military action, and that was also criticized in the Supreme Court case of Nandini Sundar versus the state of Chhattisgarh. Right? Now after that, Manmohan Singh, who was the Prime Minister back then, saw these as a very, very major security threats because of the rising violence and the deaths out of the same. That is when a pan-India national security architecture was developed for the first time, wherein the government of India actually envisaged that security is definitely important. We have to weed out these Naxalites, but also we have to understand this hard force cannot work alone. We have to also carry on development, such as building roads, schools, supplying electricity, and so on. But the violence would not stop anytime soon, because in 2010, on April 6, 2010, which is a black day for India, where we have seen 76 CRPF Jawans losing their life in Dantewada, which was one of the most affected regions. And this was actually in Bastar, right? Where in Bastar, by that time we have seen how around 10,000 armed cadres of Naxalites were present. 180 plus districts were affected. Therein, the government of India then in 2011 came up with this integrated action plan, which delineated around 25 to 30 crores per district. And in 2013, another Black Day event happened, the Jairam Ghati massacre, which took the lives of more than 29 people, including even senior Congress leaders. And this was a tipping point. And soon after, we have seen how the government also changed at the center. We have seen how the present government come in 2014, and since then we have seen very strict actions, right? But before that, let us actually understand the geography. Because if you see the Red Corridor here, in 2013, if you can see, just around 10-15 years ago, we have had around 182 districts in this entire parts of our country. If you see, even if you see, some of the areas fall in the western part of our country. Right now, it is only left in few pockets, and according to our statement by the Home Minister, these pockets are also eliminated to a large extent, because he yesterday declared that India right now is free from Naxalism. Now, if you see the status of the same of the various states is that, in most of the states, significant clearing of the Naxalites has happened. Various encounters have happened, and more than the encounters, we have also converted the Naxalites into mainstream citizens. We have given them education, we have given them jobs, and etc. But we have to also understand why Bastar was actually one area where the Naxalites, even right now, if there are even 1-2 Naxals, according to some experts there are some reasons for that same. Firstly, this is a very large area where the Naxalites at one time of their peak power held their own fortress there. So mainly there are two forest regions. Firstly, we have the Abu Jamad and the Dandakaranya forest areas. One interesting fact about Abu Jamad is that firstly it's actually served as a headquarters of the Naxals when they were at their peak power. Also, when we talk about this particular area, this is actually known as India's least unsurveyed area. Even during the British time, right, it was actually that densely forested areas where even the British could not go and have various revenue records or revenue data. Even right now in India, as of now, it is one of the least unsurveyed areas. You can just understand, in India as of now in 2026, there can be such areas at all, right, where we have most of the population belonging to the tribal sections. There is around 70% of Bastar is tribal, and mostly they are from the marginalized section. Firstly, due to colonial reasons. Secondly, due to lack of developmental initiatives after independence. Thirdly, due to extreme violence in which these tribal populations were actually trapped in the crossfire between the Naxals and the police forces, right? Also, why the Naxals actually had a very good stronghold on Bastar. And from Bastar, they tried to distribute their own economic resources too. Because Bastar is right now a very, very rich reserve of iron ore, bauxite, limestone. That means that it has a huge amount of mineral abundance. So, the marginalized support of the tribals, the dense forests, and the lack of roads and development, the three magic recipe that were actually one of the root causes of Naxalism in the country. So if I can break down these causes into two sections even more, firstly we have economic causes and structural causes. So these are the causes which have impeded our development in these areas. Firstly, the cause of land alienation, which started from the colonial times. The British came there, cut down their forest and made railway tracks out of the trees, and giving no compensation in return. So these particular things are also continuing right now. Land alienation is also happening. Zamindari exploitation happened there in the form of land exploitation. Also, when we enacted the PISA Act in 1996, which actually gave a lot of power to the 5th schedule areas with reference to their local governance, because the Panchayati Raj institution reforms and the municipal reforms were not uniformly applied to all of India. So there were some tribal areas, mainly the 5th schedule areas, where those amendments were not imposed. And that is where a separate act, the PISA 1996 Act, came into picture, to actually give more powers to the tribal areas where they can have their own local Gram Sabha controlled by their own people. But that was also violated. That was also not strictly implemented by the state governments. Many critics also criticize this. Also, we have had so many road projects, some of the various mining projects and various other projects happening in these Naxal affected areas. But the main economic benefits did not trickle down to the local people, where the local people were actually under heavy debt, heavy loans. And at the end of the day, whatever economic benefits that the capitalists or the private companies had or various other people had, that could not trickle down to the people. And when we talk about governance, that was also a failure. Since independence, right, there was an absence of state. When we talk about state, the government has to be present there via proper development, roads, institutions, schools, colleges, post offices, various other government buildings, which was totally lacking. Even our Home Minister recently told that benefits like rice procurement, free rice, 15% job reservation could never reach Bastar, right? Even after years of independence. where police was seen as an oppressor because they would simply extract various bribes because corruption was rampant. Judicial orders, judicial rights of the people were not enforced, and political representation from those areas were very, very low. So definitely, Naxalism spread like wildfire because people actually gave local support in those areas to Naxals because simply of these many issues that they were facing. Now we have discussed, right? Before 2013, the government was actually not being able to take proper actions against the Naxal forces. But after the same, after the recent government came into power in 2014, we have had a slew of initiatives, right? So we have looked at the causes right now. Now, exactly if you can understand the initiatives that the present government has taken, along with the state governments too, you can understand that we are actually trying to address those issues. Firstly, the government of India came up with a national approach, which is a Samadhan. All of you must have heard about it. So this is where we are talking about smart leadership, aggressive strategy, motivation and training, actionable intelligence, dashboard-based KPIs where we are trying to gather various data at the district level, harnessing technology where we are actually using drones, CCTV cameras, satellites to monitor the hideouts of the various Naxal leaders, and action plan for each theatre. Finally, no access to financing. So this was the broader strategy that we try to follow. Now, the state governments also had their own measures. Apart from the same, when we talk about the CRPF, they had their own Cobra operation, which was actually a resolute action and consisted of jungle warriors. We had 10 battalions which actually led a lot of encounters of those criminal Naxal leaders. Next, we have the District Reserve Guards of Chhattisgarh, which was actually composed of the state police itself, right? And many ex-Naxal or local tribal people actually gave support to them. Next, we have the Special Task Force, which were in the states of Andhra, Telangana and Odisha. We also had the CAPF branch where we had various developmental center in Bastar. They set up various camps, more than 17 number, and that is where we had tried to give various amount of local initiatives and developmental schemes. Also, when we talk about Operation Green Hunt, right, it was actually a major interstate operation to weed out the illegal and criminal Naxal leaders. We also are using drones and technology for aerial surveillance, and at the end of the day, right now, there are so many road projects, particularly under Pradhan Mantri Gram Sarak Yojana. Right? So these are the various developmental aspirations that we are trying to do. Apart from the same, we are also following a policy of surrender and rehabilitation, where we are giving cash, housing, vocational training. For example, cash initiatives range from 5 lakhs to 25 lakhs. These are offered to those big Naxal leaders to surrender by taking cash and taking care of their families. Apart from that, we are also having so many states, if you can see, right, where Maoists and Naxalites are surrendering, accepting the financial aid across various states. Even our Home Minister is telling right now that 3,000 Naxals have surrendered and 20 crores have been spent on their skilling initiatives and education. And Andhra Pradesh model of surrendering of the Naxal population here is very, very novel because they started way back in 1990s and 2000s. And it is cited as the best practice. Why? Because the state of Andhra Pradesh have followed 4 approaches. First approach is political engagement, that is having peace talks with them. Second, effective STF operation, and this is where we have intelligence-led targeted elimination. So based on our intelligence forces using the IB and the state police intelligence services such as CID, we are actually having various targeted eliminations of those top leaders. Third is the surrender policy, where the state government of Andhra Pradesh used to give various incentives such as cash, housing and so on, so that the local youth at least will be assured that the government is there to take care of them. right? And at the end of the day, development, such as land reforms, such as welfare schemes, and so on. And also in 2014, the state of Andhra Pradesh bifurcated, right, into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. These also cut off various leadership chains of Naxals. And this is why this model came to be admired nationally. In fact, the Samadhan that we have just seen, it was inspired by this Andhra Pradesh model, right? Also, if you see some various novel initiatives which you can mention in your mains answers, which were taken by Odisha, for example, it actually gave various rehabilitation practices way back in 2000s and 2010s decades. Right now it is stopping. Why? Because it is right now Mao is free, right? So this kind of strategies actually have worked. Also, rehabilitation drives are taking place in Madhya Pradesh, where more Nakshals are given swing missions so that they can have their own enterprise. Also, Kanka in Chhattisgarh became the first district to provide jobs to the surrendered Maoists. So this is where we have to understand that since 1970s, India has come a long way in reducing the violence to less than 100 right now, right? And that is where we have to understand, as of now, if our home ministry is telling that India is right now free of Naxalism, it is true to a very, very large extent. Now, there is a small extent of people and political commentators who are telling that there are still concerns and unresolved issues. Firstly, we understand not only in Naxal affected areas, in other parts of the country also we have seen land alienation. People at the village level, marginalized section at the village level, they are not getting various compensation packages due to the land displacement or due to the infringement of the tribal rights, the lack of implementation of the Forest Rights Act. So there are some issues which are still remaining. Also, there are some opposition parties who are commenting that this declaration is merely political in nature because there are some pockets which are still there due to the presence of Naxal forces. Also, many people criticize the huge number of human right violations. For example, women being killed, children being killed, which were seen in various media reports also. And this is where we have to understand the role of police forces become very important. That is where they have to improve their way of operation in those areas with a very soft approach, but maintaining that strict stance. Also, many people complain that the 67,000 rupees per person as rehabilitation is not adequate in present times. Also, various media houses are right now still not allowed to enter the heavily affected areas of Bastar. So, as of now, various opposition groups are complaining that if the media is not allowed to enter, how will we get a true picture, right? Also, there are presence of various urban intellectuals who still believe in the 1970s doctrine of Charu Majumdar. And that is where these urban Nakshals are alleged to still secretly fund, even taking the help of ISI, right? Also, there is a very major perception about the Nakshalites for the mainstream population, that these Nakshalites were involved in violence, that they are bad people, that they are this, they are that. So the media perception, that the mass perception is not good, and that is our fault. That is not their fault. We are sometimes ignorant of the true realities, the true atrocities that they faced. Instead of thinking of them as bad, we have to understand the main issues that they have faced and accommodate them in the mainstream society. Because according to various Supreme Court cases also, if you can see, Supreme Court have time and again called regarding the various human right violation, regarding the land right issues, and also regarding the various implementation of the PISA and the Forest Rights Act. So this is where we have to right now take the biggest and the most difficult step right now. The difficult step was not eliminating the Nakshalites. The difficult state will be right now to accommodate them in our Indian society, giving them good recognition, shedding of the negative bias that we have. And in this case, movies like Newton actually do wonders. In the comment section, can anyone let me know what actually took place in Newton and why am I referring to this in this topic? After you have done that, you also separately comment the answer or an outline to this answer, right? Because right now This is a major topic which was also asked in the PYQs. So again, there can be another question based on what the government can do from now on, because the real test begins now. So now we'll be moving on to the next one, where there is a very huge article in the Hindu today which is talking on the need for India to quickly transition and utilize the waste of our country and convert them to energy. This is where we are talking about decentralized bioenergy systems. Now, why we are talking this right now? Because all of us are hearing this term known as energy security. Energy security has been in the news every single day because of this Iran crisis which is happening, because of this Middle East war which is happening right now. Because we have seen due to the war, our supplies of the crude oil have stopped almost. We have also seen how the cylinders have become expensive. Today again the petrol and the diesel prices approximately has been risen by 90 paisa. Various auto drivers, the taxi drivers in the NCR region are thinking about going to strike on May 21st. Why are all these things happening? Amongst other things such as rising inflation. In the recent times we have also seen how the wholesale price index has risen. How even, for example, maybe the CPI in the coming month also will be rising. These are all due to the lack of energy security in our country. Because as a country, we are still almost 85% dependent on the imported crude oil. Crude oil from those Middle Eastern countries. Also, if you can understand, the bill that we are paying in dollars is at the tune of $132 billion. That was also of 2023-24. Right now, this number is only going to increase, right? And this is what is also causing the depreciation of our Indian rupee, because simply the dollar is appreciating like anything right now, right? Also, these geopolitical disruptions, not only in Iran, but also we had so many issues in Russia, Ukraine, which was also one of the main reasons why we have the higher prices of crude oil since 2022, right? And this is where energy security, that is India's own ability to meet our energy needs reliably, without any tension, in a very chill way, is being threatened right now, right? And the main solution to this entire energy security menace, that we are dependent on fossil fuel on some of the countries, can be solved by two things. Firstly, renewable energies such as hydropower, solar power, and so many ways of renewable energy. Another way is actually utilizing the huge waste of our country. Wastes means the agricultural wastes, food wastes, sewage wastes, and the organic municipal wastes. Now these are all very simple things we can understand. We see them every day. Now we can convert this waste into energy, right? Now in India, we have seen in villages, in cities, in towns, in all parts of our country, we see these things everywhere, है everywhere they are there. But the thing is that we can effectively utilize them and convert into something which is known as bioenergy, right? Because when we talk about bioenergy, we use the biomass. Biomass is actually any organic waste which is of biological origin, such as crop residue, food waste, animal waste, municipal solid waste, etc. Right? So these are the waste which we see everywhere lying here and there. And if we talk about the waste resource of our country, right, we generate 750 million tons of agricultural biomass per year. Now this is only agricultural biomass. There are other kinds of biomass also that we have seen right now. So just imagine how much of biomass we are generating. Also, out of this, only 230 million tons are used by us. For what? For bioenergy, which is nothing but the energy derived from biomass using various conversion processes. So there are two technologies that we will discuss in the next few slides. And this is what gives us opportunity, because we are taking all of those wastes, agricultural waste, food waste, we are putting in the technologies that we have, and what we are getting, clean energy. This is clean energy which we can use to fuel our homes, factories, etc., and be less dependent on the Middle Eastern countries for their oil, right? Right now we have to think about these things very, very well. Right? Now, if we can utilize this particular biomass and convert them into bioenergy in a very efficient way, what we are doing, we can nearly replace 1/3 of the fuel imports that we are doing right now. 33% or one third is a huge number. But the main problem is that we do not have a single point source of, say, national policy or legislation on how to do this. So this article is proposing two technologies. First is gasification and aerobic digestion. But let us understand each technology individually. For example, when we talk about the technology number 1, which is where we are using the gasifier, what we are trying to do? We are actually collecting all the dry biomass like the crops residue, husk and various other dry waste which are of organic origin. Just keep in mind that this kind of waste must be of organic origin only or plant origin. And that is where we can put this waste in this gasifier. This gasifier will be having various stages. These stages are known as drying, pyrolysis, where we are trying to dry the waste, suck out the moisture and water. In pyrolysis, we are trying to break down the waste without any oxygen. We are trying to heat it. Next, we are doing partial oxidation, where we are trying to have a small amount of oxygen react with the gases. And this is where heat can be released. This is where syngas is obtained, and as a byproduct we can get the biochar, which is actually a very carbon rich material. This material is extremely useful for our agriculture, because if you can mix it with soil, the soil will retain water for a long period of time. Even microbial health and microorganism can develop properly. And at the end of the day, the most important thing of this kind of technology is that we can get carbon credits for such technologies. So say there is some small MSME who would like to set up a biogas plant. So they can actually use carbon credits, right, to set up this factory and even sell the carbon credits that they can get using this entire particular process. Now when we talk about the syngas can directly power our factories, our homes, right? And it is also very easily can be upgraded to the renewable fuels and chemicals too. For example, renewable methane, methanol, ethanol, hydrogen. So for example, it's a national hydrogen project that we have, the ethanol biofuel policy that we have. So everything can be supplemented using this syngas. So just understand that one technology is actually hitting so many applications. Now come to the next technology, which easily can be used for wet organic waste. Now how this is happening? Firstly, we will be collecting various wet waste such as sewage, food waste, animal manure, industrial organic waste also. For example, in sugar mills, we get the various sugar byproducts, right? We also have distilleries. And finally, we can also collect the various organic waste streams which have very high moisture in them. So what do? We take all these wastes and we put it in a anaerobic biodigester. Now this is where we do not use oxygen, hence the name anaerobic, right? Where we have various microorganisms without the presence of oxygen breaking down the waste in a biological way. No pollution happens here, right? Maybe there will be some emission of methane, right, in this particular process, but that will also be captured, because what comes out is actually biogas. Biogas is mainly methane in nature and carbon dioxide nature. What shall we do with it? We will try to capture it and we will try to use it for cooking, heating, electricity and so on. The other digested that we will getting, it can be again used in agriculture as soil amendment, which can improve our soil fertility and even improve the agricultural wastes. So in essence, when we talk about this anaerobic digestion, it is best suited for the sewage treatment plant, food waste, animal manure, etc. And it can easily work in various urban settings too. For example, say urban sewage treatment plants. In the sewage treatment plant, as of now, we do not have the anaerobic digestion plants there in uniform distribution across the country. So we can do that, right? Because there are so many sewage treatment plants from where we can easily get biogas. Also, there are some dairy clusters, animal farms, food processing units, large industrial campuses or canteens where we can get daily wet waste, and some rural communities, right? Now, we have looked at these two technologies. Now, what the main article is trying to argue is that why don't we have a combination of both of the approaches? Why don't we have the combination of gasification units and the anaerobic digesters in cities and villages of our country? This is where we are talking about decentralized bioenergy. Now, this model is a very simple model. What we do? We try to collect the biomass in our villages, in our towns, in our cities. We try to segregate according to the dry waste and the wet waste. So what do we do with all this dry and wet waste? We try to not transport it to various plants, because transportation is a huge cost where we are using fossil fuel itself. So we should not be transporting them to plants. Instead, what we can do? We can actually set up these plants separately in various rural industries, in agro-processing clusters, in MSMEs, in various waste heavy regions directly, for which we do not need to transport them to factories and then this particular energy will be supplied to other industries. Instead of that, we can do it at a very low level, that is even at the village level too. So this is exactly what we are talking about. Decentralized bioenergy is the need of the hour, particularly during the energy crisis situation which we are facing right now. And this is where even the Gram Sabha, the local municipal organizations, they can directly procure funds and they can set up, more than 50-60 biogas plants or say various other gasification plants in their own particular Gram Sabha itself, or say in their own jurisdiction itself, right? So this is where this model must be adopted by India as soon as possible according to the article. And this actually makes a lot of sense too. But before we move forward, I want all of you to pause the screen and individually tell me in the comments using 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And tell me, for large urban plants, what we need? We need more gasification plants, or we need more anaerobic digesters. Do the same for agro-processing clusters, dairy livestock belts, MSMEs and rural communities, and give me an answer according to the various scenarios that we have just seen, right? Now for this particular initiative, the government also have been taking various indirect initiatives. Firstly, we have the National Bioenergy Mission. So under this, we have various sub-schemes: biomass program, waste to energy program and biogas program. So the technologies that we have seen right now, the government of India actually envisaged this way back. Also, we have various waste to energy plants which are being set up in various state governments. Now this is what is being criticized by many, because we are not getting a steady flow of energy from these plants, because maybe the technology is very old, or even some plants are not yet completed. Also, when we talk about the sustainable alternative towards affordable transportation, this is where we are thinking of setting up around 5,000 compressed biogas plants. So this is where we are trying to set up such plants to make the transportation less dependent on crude oil, petroleum, etc. Also, we have the Govardhan initiative, where we are utilizing the wet biomass, right, the sewage, to convert them into bioenergy. Also, when we talk about the Swachh Bharat Mission, Urban 2.0, we are trying to transform the urban areas, collect the waste, have proper waste distribution channels, have proper segregation of dry waste and wet waste, under which we have also seen how the city of Indore have consistently performed at top levels as becoming one of the cleanest cities in India. This is where they have also been following this dry and the waste weight model, where we are trying to have proper segregation and supplying those waste to those local enterprises which are consisting of biogas plants. And at the end of the day, we also have a national plan on climate change. Now, under national plan of climate change, we have various sub-plans also. For example, renewable plan, solar plan, and etc. Under the same, we also have a plan for energy efficiency, where we are trying to have proper aspects of biogas generation by having better energy out of the biomass that we already have. Finally, when we discuss the challenges, this is where we have to understand that addressing these challenges will be the way forward. Way forward for India to be energy secure. Firstly, when we talk about the logistics and collection, we have seen how traditional model is following this. What we are doing? We have in India so many areas from where we are getting so many wastes. The traditional plants are collecting the waste firstly, then they are transporting the bulky waste, which is very costly, to those industries who will be setting up the plants at a very large scale. So we do not have very small scale ones. So this is the very first challenge that we have to address. That is a logistical challenge, right? And this logistical challenge is giving rise to feedstock inconsistency. For example, say if in a state there are say 20 districts, right? Now in all 20 districts we will get a huge amount of feedstock and bio wastes, right? Say wet wastes. But if there are only 3 factories, then what about the economics of generation of the bioenergy? Firstly, you need a lot of transport. Then a lot of waste also will be wasted there itself, right? So the main thing that we are doing here is converting waste to wealth. So waste should not be seen as waste. It is actually wealth. But if we are trying to transport it over long distances, over only few districts in which we have plants, then we are actually effectively wasting the waste itself, right? And this is where, if you see, in India we have strong potential of bioenergy, but our execution is weak, and capacity is actually going to increase by only small amount of around 15 gigawatts by 2032, which is actually quite low. So that is why we need more funds. We need more plants to be set up individually at the district level, and even much more better at the Gram Sabha level, at the town level, at the city level itself, right? And next, when we talk about the energy that we generate, sometimes there are various states in the country which find it very difficult to supply that bioenergy to the mainstream electricity grid, because there are some technological issues, there are some rate charges issues, legal issues too. We have to solve that, because when we talk about the funds, these funds must go into improving the technology. These funds must be going into improving the various capacities, the skills of this particular sector. And that is where we have to also talk about improving and setting up more regulatory institutions using these funds. Regulatory institutions to regulate the bioenergy in the country, right? And this is where we can understand, if we have a better bioenergy architecture or distribution system in the entire country, we can also attract investments in the form of carbon credits. So even if you can understand, there are so many foreign companies who are interested to come to India just to buy carbon credits. They are also doing the same from our farmers. So some of the farmers in India are also doing carbon farming on their fields. The similar thing we can also achieve in this bioenergy sector. So in this one, we need more funds, better laws, better technology, better regulation, better carbon markets, and at the end of the day, better distribution system to be set up at a decentralized level, right? Because as of now, the waste to energy scenario in India is seen as a failure, as something which is lagging behind, and that is what exactly we have to take forward. For you, there is a very simple task. Attempt this question right now in the comments and let me know, so that I can give the feedback, and then we can go on to the prelims pointers. In the first article of the prelims pointers, our cricket fans will be very much interested to know that the BCCI is not under the RTI Act, because according to the Central Information Commission, the BCCI is not a public authority as defined by the RTI Act. But before going into the details, let us understand firstly some very basic information for prelims under the CIC concepts. Firstly, the CIC is a statutory body. Why? Because we have the RTI Act delineating that at the central level we should be having a CIC. Under CIC, we have firstly the Chief Information Commissioner and 10 other information commissioners. And at the state level, we have the SIC, under which there is a similar structure too, according to the various state governments. So at the central level, we have the CIC, which is actually at the behest of implementing the RTI Act at a uniform level, and also looking into various appeals, looking into various judgments, passing orders, and also imposing penalties. They can impose penalties from around say 250 rupees per day to various public officials who deny information, to even going to lakhs, right? So this is where we have to keep in mind some things regarding the CIC here. Now moving into the article itself, there have been various debates in the country. I'm sure all of you also have participated, and that is why at the end of this article you should let me know in the comments whether you agree with this news or not. So let me explain you firstly. The BCCI, you know, is a prime cricket regulating authority in the country. So we have the Indian national team being represented, right? We also see the BCCI designing the jerseys, using the Indian national flag, selecting who will be playing in our Indian national team, even having various broadcasting rights, revenues. You can also hear this in the popular media that BCCI is the world's richest cricketing board, right? Sometimes we also hear informally that BCCI is even more powerful than the ICC, है ना? So these are the things that we hear. And despite that, the BCCI is not a public authority. It has been clarified by the CIC. Why? Despite using the various benefits that we have seen right now, even benefits such as tax exemptions, subsidized land for stadiums, subsidized security for various IPL matches, for example. After using all these benefits, are we trying to say that BCCI is not a public authority, right? This is what we are getting clarity from the CIC, that it is not. BCCI is not a public authority because firstly, it is not mentioned in the constitution like UPSC, like election commissioner. So these are all the constitutional bodies, right? Also, by any other law made by parliament or state legislature, BCCI is not a public authority again. Also, by notification issued or order made by the appropriate government, again, BCCI is not a public authority, because according to the section 2H of the RTI Act, if any authority is falling under 1, 2 and 3 categories, then only that is a public authority, right? And also, we have to keep in mind that any body owned, controlled or substantially financed directly or indirectly by the funds of the government of India, that would also be a public authority. Or some non-governmental organizations such as NGO who are substantially financed directly or indirectly by the funds provided by the government, that would also be a public authority. But in all these 3 cases and 5 cases, the BCCI is not receiving any funds directly from the government of India. The BCCI tells that whatever I am getting from my own business of cricket, that is more than enough, and that is where the government of India does not even give 1 rupee, right, directly or indirectly to the BCCI. But indirectly, if you see, the benefits are actually quite huge. They are actually selecting the Indian national team, designing the jerseys, using national flag, taking land at subsidized rate for stadium, security and everything, but still we do not have. And that is why the many public say groups in the society, they have argued that why BCCI is not included as public authority, why the citizens of the country are not getting the various revenue shares from the BCCI. They are telling that the government of India should be actually be getting some funds from the BCCI, because simply the BCCI has a huge amount of corpus. So mainly people want to know about what is going on in the BCCI too. For example, the appointments of the members, the various corruption cases which happen, and the various other things which actually take place in the BCCI. Because there are sometimes some allegations that there are some irregularities. So for the people and for the argument which is supporting that the BCCI is serving as a massive public function, the CIC is telling instead that the BCCI is not falling under the RTI Act because it is not having a public function. Public functions pertain to various government authorities and various other institutions. The same is not applicable to BCCI. Also, some argument is that it is substantially financed by the state, indirectly via the subsidies on land and etc. But the CIC is telling that BCCI is totally autonomous and a private society as it is registered under the Tamil Nadu Societies Registration Act. The BCCI, according to the CIC, generates its own revenue through the tickets and the rights and the various other things. So that is why there is no substantial financial grant from the government. Also, there is another argument that since the government owns the BCCI, that is why it should be under the RTA Act. But according to the CIC, the BCCI has no government control in day-to-day functions, in finance, in administration or management. So this is what the current state of the BCCI is all about. In prelims, they can ask regarding these various situations and the statuses. Now in the comment section, you let me know whether this is a perfect definition of BCCI or not. Now we will be moving on to the next one, where this article is focused on a very important space mission launched by the collaborative efforts of China and some European countries. Let us actually firstly understand why this mission is launched in the very first place by looking at one problem it wants to solve. Firstly, we know that Earth has a magnetic shield, right? Just by the virtue of Earth itself and the core and the mantle and the various currents that we have within the same, we generate a magnetic field. Now this magnetic field is very, very important for us, for the life on Earth to be protected. Why? Because from time to time, we get various solar wind, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, which are actually huge clouds of plasma which are outburst from the sun. And where they go out in the space, out in the open and towards the Earth. If at all we see even some fraction of the coronal mass ejection reach the Earth's crust, there can be catastrophic impacts. That is where our magnetospheres come into picture. It is acting as a shield, if you can see here, where the incoming solar particles are actually kind of deflected away with reference to our magnetic fields, and even if some particles enter, they can easily enter under the north and the south poles, where interaction with the atmospheric particles, the solar particles generate these huge colorful phenomena, right? These are actually known as auroras, right? In the comment section, you should let me know what are the names of the auroras in the North Pole and the South Pole. Now, the main important ingredient or recipe for auroras, as you have understood, are these solar charged particles which come, right? Sometimes the solar charged particles can look very beautiful like this, and at other times, they can cause huge damage, because simply we have some amounts of satellites which are going on around the Earth, transmitting to us various communication signals. If the solar flares become hugely, say, more intense, this can totally fry the circuit boards of these satellites, and the satellites can be totally inoperable, right? Also, if these solar flares even become more intense, they can reach the life on Earth, totally drying everything there. So that is why the magnetosphere that we have is the strongest protection force that we have. And that was also the point of matter of this PYQ from 2022, which is trying to ask you that if a major solar storm reaches the Earth, which of the following are the most possible impacts? So looking at this figure also, take some hints and let me know what is the answer in the comments below. Also, when we actually talk about the main mission here, the main mission is a collaborative effort by China and some European countries. So here, a particular space observatory device will be launched, which will be having two important payloads. Firstly, the X-ray imager and the ultraviolet imager. The X-ray imager will be looking into the various high density energy streams in the Earth's magnetosphere, right? So it will be trying to warn us if at all there are some huge solar storms coming or not at the X-ray level. And at the ultraviolet level, we will also be trying to absorb the upper atmosphere, and we will be trying to assume or understand if there are some intense solar events or not. And that is where it will be giving us full view of how the Earth's magnetosphere shield is actually working in real time or not. So it will be kind of an eye in the space, right, which will be looking into the various aspects of the space weather. So earlier we only used to take pictures of the various solar particles moving, say, inside our Earth's magnetic field. Right now we will actually be having a continuous live feedback of the entire zone. Also, earlier we actually had a very limited vision. Right now if you see, this will be covering the entire Earth, and also at a higher accuracy too. It can have, immense amount of, benefits for the entire world. Why? Because we have so many satellites and the various other space assets such as the International Space Station, where we need to protect them properly, and that is where this will be acting as an early warning system, because we want to prevent another Carrington event of 1859, which actually was an event where a huge solar flare actually came onto us within the Earth's atmosphere itself and actually led to loss of destruction. So this is actually a collaborative milestone, right, between China and European forces, which will help us to improve our understanding using these important payloads. So these payloads can be important for your examinations, because this satellite is carrying around 2600 kgs of payloads, which have been developed firstly by European Space Agency, and these three by Chinese space agencies themselves. So the first one is soft X-ray imager, which will be capturing the various X-rays emitted from the sun so that we can predict better. Also, the ultraviolet aurora imager will be launched, because it will be looking at the glowing auroras and also will be getting signals as to whether the space weather is stable or not. Also, finally, we'll be having the magnetosphere and the light ion analyzer. So this will be looking into the charged particles into the space, understanding the Earth's magnetic field better. So we will now move on to the next one, where we will understand what were the new announcements and initiatives which were announced at the India-Norway summit. Also, most importantly, we will understand why this partnership has been given the tag of Green Strategic Partnership. So firstly, when we talk about the two countries, recently Norway has actually given our Prime Minister the highest civilian order. And this is a very, very significant event for the two countries itself, because historically our Prime Minister's visit to Norway is the first in 40 years. Just imagine, the last time an Indian Prime Minister visited was way back in 1983, and she was Indira Gandhi. After that, we are actually coming close to those Nordic countries, because firstly, we visited Sweden recently, and next stop is Norway, where we announced this Green Strategic Partnership. Also, when we talk about the pillars of the Green Strategic Partnership, we have to understand the very strategic location of Norway. If you see, Norway has a huge coast, and the coast is having proximity to the Barents Sea, Norwegian Sea, Atlantic Ocean, right, and even the North Sea in the south, right. Please keep in mind that we are not touching Baltic Sea or Gulf of Finland or other say water bodies in this region, because these can be major traps for your prelims examination, right. So when we talk about the very first pillar, we are collaborating on clean energy and climate resilience, just because Norway is actually one of the world's leader in offshore wind energy. This is why we want to take their expertise. Also, Norway gets 98% of electricity from hydropower. That is also a fantastic thing that India can learn. And ironically, paradoxically, Norway is also actually one of the world's major oil and gas exporter too. So we can actually diversify away from the Middle East too. For India, Norway can benefit in the way that India is the world's third largest energy consumer. So Norway can supply steady amount of energy to India, despite being located thousands of miles away. Having a good and reliable energy supplier based on renewable and even non-renewable energy is a very crucial thing for India, especially when India wants to have 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. Especially when we have various national hydrogen mission, where we are also thinking of using renewable energy to produce green hydrogen. Also, this next pillar is on blue economy and green shipping, because Norway is one of the world's largest seafood exporter, one of the world's largest significant seafaring countries also. Just remember, the Vikings actually come from this region itself, है ना? Also, when we talk about aquaculture, when it comes to salmon farming, Norway is at the top. India will also giving Norway various important benefits. For example, India has the Sagarmala program, which is a port-led initiative, right? And also we are thinking of having various private auctions, inviting private companies for deep sea mining under blue economy too, where we will get various raw earth materials, polymetallic nodules and so on, which will be important for our critical mineral mission too. Also, we are collaborating on the space sector too. Particularly, when we talk about the ISRO and the Norwegian Space Agency collaboration, we have a memorandum of understanding. Also, the Svalsat is actually the world's largest commercial ground for launching the polar orbiting satellites, because since it is obviously located to the North Pole and hence the polar observatory satellites are better launched from there, India and ISRO can better utilize Norway for this particular opportunity. Now, one of the biggest cooperation is actually under the Arctic zone. If you see, Norway is actually situated in the Arctic region. Significant part of the Norwegian country is in the Arctic region, and India being a part of the Svalbard Treaty since its inception, right? We have Norway as a very close partner, because also when we talk about Himadri, which is actually India's research center in Norway itself, we can simply understand how deep the collaboration is when it comes to research and development, mainly in the climate study, in oceanographic study and the various other aspects too, right? Also, India is an Arctic Council observer state. So India is actually present in this council itself indirectly as an observer. And finally, when we talk about the health and digital cooperation, Norway can give significant benefits to India in terms of digital health and AI in healthcare, because it is actually way ahead in technology than India in healthcare. Also, we can use Norwegian funds and expertise and technology and financial expertise in bettering our digital public infrastructure, such as the Aadhaar card system that we have and the UPI system that we have and the various other cloud-based system that we have. Norway can better give us this technical expertise in these fields. So this was all for the partnership here for today. We will now move on to the next article, because recently 7 Indian private startups have participated in Italy along with ISRO as a part of India's overall mission to promote more private sector participation in the space sector. So this is where we come to this confusion. Whenever we talk about ISRO and its various arms, we are always confused. Firstly, we have the Antariksh or the Antariksh arm. Then we have the NSIL and the InSpace. Just imagine Antariksh to be a foreign salesman, being the oldest among these 3, say, companies of ISRO, if you can imagine. It is actually a marketing arm of the ISRO, where we are trying to sell the ISRO's product to the foreign countries, right? So that ISRO can earn more money, right? For example, Antariksh also tries to partner with European countries to launch various satellites on their behalf. We can also give various consultancy services to other governments itself or other space agencies and earn money itself. We can also sell our own satellites abroad. So these are all the things that we do. In NSIL, New Space India Limited, you can think of NSIL as a factory manager. It was set up in 2019 and it is actually the commercial arm. For example, when we talk about the rockets that ISRO use, such as the PSLV and satellites and the launchers, so this is where the NSIL becomes a very important project, because manufacturing, technological transfer even to the private sector is handled by the NSIL. And at the end, InSpace. InSpace, if you can understand, is kind of a motivator. It's kind of a coach, a captain, referee. Set up in 2020, it is kind of a promoter of Indian space initiatives, mainly for the private sector, because it acts as a single window agency to allow the non-governmental enterprises to use ISRO's facilities, to learn the technologies and finally create a startup on their own, right? So with reference to the private launches, building the startup space ecosystem in India, right, in space plays a very, very huge role. And that is another role that they have played recently at the Veneto 2026 meeting in Italy, where when we talk about India's space economy in the entire world, we are only having 2 to 3%. The target is 10% by 2033, and that is why InSpace wants to take the Indian space startups to the next level, increasing our contribution in the global space economy. And the background of this particular Veneto 2026 Accords can be traced back to G20 Summit in 2024, where this 2025 to 2029 Italy-India joint strategic action plan is going to be launched. And that is where, even under the recent collaboration between India and Italy, where our Prime Minister is also expected to visit, right? So this is where we understand the two countries coming closer, not only on other developmental parameters, but also on space parameters too. So here, the types of agreement that we sign were integrated mission management and launch service network, so that satellites can be easily launched from either countries, including the private sector. Also, we will be developing between the two countries ground station as a service, so that we can rent out our ground stations for satellite launches and earn money. We will also collaborate on CubeSat, which is an extremely small satellite, scalable satellite, which the private sector can easily build at a profitable margin. Next, we will also design the next generational navigation system and resilient space infrastructure, so that the space infrastructure is protected from the various adverse events. Finally, when we talk about the new Indian space startups, you can pause the screen. So these are the various startups that we have: Skyroot Aerospace, Agnikul, Pixel Space, Dhruva, Digantar, and Galaxy Eye. So all of these are contributing immensely, doing fantastic work in their own parameters and in their own capabilities, contributing to India's pride in the space sector. So we will now move on to the last article of the day, where we will understand how recently the scientists have managed to use DNA mapping to find the traffickers of pangolins in the entire world. Now, for prelims perspective, in recent times, UPSC has been asking various species-specific questions. So let us understand the very interesting species that is pangolins. They are actually world's one of truest scaled mammals. For example, they can, whenever they are threatened, they can roll perfectly into themselves, because they have huge scales, and these scales are extremely tough, made of keratin, and they cover all parts of the body except the belly, right? And whenever they curl into a ball, the various predators, they find it very difficult to penetrate those scales. Some more interesting facts about them: they do not have any teeth, they have extremely huge tongue, and they have very strong claws. Also, please do remember for your exam that they are not only found in India, but also in Africa and the various parts of Asia and Southeast Asia also, right? Also, some more interesting fact is that they can live both on trees and underground. And mainly they are found in tropical forest, grasslands, savannas, and even in cultivated areas of human habitation. But the main sad fact is that they are one of the world's most trafficked mammals. Be it in Africa, China, even in India and in Southeast Asia, they are hunted for their meat and scales. That is why they are protected heavily under the Appendix 1 of CITES. That is why the scientists right now in the entire world, they are collaborating on how to protect the pangolins. Firstly, they have a scientific formula. They are trying to collect the tiny samples of DNA of the already trafficked pangolins, right? And that is why they are trying to gather the samples from various fields, museums, markets, right? And even from some departments, say some customs department, who have seized some pangolin meat or scales. So they are trying to use a gene capture method from which they are extracting the DNA, and they are trying to map the DNA to various parts of the world. So if they find some similar pangolin species which they found in one customs department to that of a similar species in Africa, that means some African traffickers have brought that pangolin from Africa to India. So that is where we can detect the trade route of this trafficked pangolin species. So this is where we got some hotspots such as Southwest Cameroon, Myanmar, and some islands in Indonesia, where these routes are crossing from China to even Southeast Asia to Africa. And the traffickers are actually heavily connected between themselves, because some scientists found the meat of one particular pangolin in Africa, and that same pangolin scales were found in China. So that means that this particular chain is heavily connected between the entire world, and that is exactly how we are trying to locate those traffickers using science and technology. Now at the end, we have one PYQ from 2011. So please do read these questions carefully, answer them in the comments below, and then let me know. And at the end of the day, I thank you all for being a very patient audience. The quiz is following up. Please do attempt it. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.